of the children to stop violence against mankind and Mother Earth.
Save the world for me, where children can run free. Oh, let's pray together that war will be over. Let's stop violence.
Just
End our conflict.
so
We will love and protect our Mother Earth. Take care of our environment. Let's be the one to change the world for a better and peaceful world.
There is now being developed a nonviolent peace force, which is quite active in Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankans that are negotiating the peace treaties are often threatened by the local populace.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so one of their roles is to be an escort for the peace negotiators to
Yes.
ensure that they're not harmed.
Enhanced mediation and conciliation services. Just sit with that. Think of any conflict that has happened in the last number of years. Jimmy Carter, he went and negotiated with two sides in conflicts. He just listened to everybody and got them to write down what they wanted and got the two versions to come together. And he personally averted 3 wars simply by talking to both sides. The UN sort of does that, but it has really nothing set up to do that. Imagine the situation in Darfur if we had a standing peacekeeping force. Or in Rwanda, where 800,000 people died, and East Timor, where 200,000 people died, or the case in Haiti, where the government disbanded the army, which left it defenseless against a coup d'etat, a group of external forces came in. If there had been a standing UN peacekeeping force, they could have protected Haiti from that happening. They could be designated units from current government groups, but in fact, as we found in Rwanda, when a Belgian soldier gets killed for a global purpose, that bothers the Belgian parliament, and they had 10 peacekeepers killed, and that's really why Rwanda, 800,000 people died, because 10 Belgian peacekeepers were killed, and they weren't really global soldiers. And so that's why we really need an all-volunteer peacekeeping force.
David, that was an astonishing sentence. Because 10 Belgian peacekeepers died, 800,000 Rwandans.
It's true, it's true.
Died,
It's true.
perished. It's also because 18 American soldiers died a year earlier. That's why the United States didn't intervene. But why, you say? What's the connection between the two? It is this. The Belgian army exists to protect Belgians and Belgian national interests. The American army exists to protect Americans and American national interests. And even though many Americans, including the four of us and a lot more, felt horrible in April and May and June of 1994 when the Rwandans were getting slaughtered, you can't really argue that there was some kind of a direct American interest in there. So therefore, the American army stood aside, impotent, and watched 800,000 people get slaughtered.
That's the tragedy we're without
Now, what is the answer?
Structure of government.
The answer is to have an army that doesn't exist to protect Belgian national interests or American national interests, but whose raison d'etre is to protect common human interests, the interest that we all share, the
Global.
transnational, the universal interest in living in a world free of Rwandas, living in a world free of Darfurs, living in a world free of crimes against humanity. And that is the genius behind this notion. You know, we'd call it a standing UN rapid deployment force, but it's really an army of humanity.
This peacekeeping force, I think we're talking about, needs to be not only a peacekeeping force, but a nation-building force to take care of the needs of the nations that have been plundered by war.
The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is essentially a very simple bargain in which the non-nuclear weapon states of the world, which are 182, have promised not to develop nuclear weapons. In exchange, 5 nuclear weapon states have promised to negotiate the elimination of those nuclear weapons. There are really no problems that the nuclear weapons seek to solve that are as hazardous as the existence of the nuclear weapons themselves. So the commitment has been made by the diplomats. Now, in a sense, one could say the light has been shown on the subject, and now civil society has to put the heat on the subject and force our politicians to comply with these promises.
In terms of peace and disarmament issues, there was a strong call to go towards preventive actions, so that we called for a corps of at least 50 professionally trained mediators that will focus on conflict prevention.
Peace education in all schools and women at all negotiations tables must be given priority. Women's voices are heard in all peace and disarmament efforts.
We also, in terms of peacekeeping efforts, it would give authority, if it was passed, for the General Assembly to establish an international standing peacekeeping force that could intervene whenever there's conflict situations.
The possible utility of what I've called a United Nations Peace Corps, which would serve a multiplicity of functions. The Peace Corps that I envisage would be kept busy year-round. When it wasn't in an active military mode on the orders of the Security Council, it would be engaged in development assistance or humanitarian assistance. These would be under a unified UN command, and they would be all volunteers. They'd be in integrated units, and none could be withdrawn at the behest of the country from which the soldier happened to come, and they'd be in mixed contingents. So that would give them a kind of stability which is now lacking in current UN peacekeeping operations. Rwanda, General Romeo Dallaire, the Canadian general who was ultimately in charge of the peacekeeping operation, said that as few as 5,000 troops would have averted the genocide of 800,000 Rwandans. East Timor is another such case. Again, you'd have to have a force somewhere in the general area, because I envisage bases at 4 or 5 locations around the globe. So let's say we had a force in being at a base, an leased base in Thailand or the Philippines. They could have been dispatched there, again, in about 48 hours and averted most of the killing. Averting conflict is ever so much more cost-effective than addressing conflict once it erupts. It would come out in the long term as a really big bargain.
For a culture of peace and non-violence, for us and the children of the world.